Hi, everyone. We're going to do an example of taking some words and putting it into a table of values, a graph, and an equation. So let's get started. It says Big Pine Outfitters charges a base fee of $40 to deliver the canoe to the launch site and $10 per hour of use. So let's take a look and see what do we know here. We can see that it costs, so important information here is that the base fee is $40. Right? And we also see that we are paying $10 per hour of use, right? So we want to figure out what are the two variables that we're looking at. So one variable we are using in this example is time, right? How many hours are we renting the canoe? So time is one variable. And we're measuring time in hours. The second variable we're looking at is the cost. How much does it cost to rent this canoe? And our cost is being measured in dollars. Once you have your two variables, it's helpful to think about which one is the independent variable and which one is the dependent variable. So I like to ask myself, does the time depend on the cost, or does the cost depend on the time? In this case here, the cost will depend on how much time you have the canoe for. So cost is the dependent variable, and time will be independent. So now we want to try and put a table of values together. In a table of values, the independent variable will always go on the left-hand side, and the dependent variable always goes on the right-hand side. So we're going to have time here and cost here. To get our values, let's go back and look at our numbers. We have a base fee of $40, and then for every hour we use the canoe, we're paying an additional 10. So this is $10 per hour. Hopefully you can recognize that, hey, that's a rate of change. So our rate of change is $10 per hour. And this base fee of 40, that's just the initial cost. So initially, when our time is 0, we have to pay $40. So that information about the base fee helps us to put down our very first point. At time 0, we are paying $40. And then for every hour that we keep the canoe for use, we are paying an additional $10. So if I'm going to do 1 hour of canoeing, I'm going to be paying $10 plus the original 40. So 10 plus 40 means that the total cost would be $50. What would you pay if you took the canoe for 2 hours? If you said 60, that's correct. Because you paid $40 for the initial amount, and $10 for 2 hours is 10 times 2 is $20. So $20 plus the 40 gives you the 60. Here's what our completed table might look like. So 0, 40, 1, 50, 2, 60, 3 hours, $70, 4 hours, $80, and we could keep on going if we wanted to. But a table of values should have your independent variable and your dependent variable listed on the top, and then all of your values here. Let's point out just a few features of that we can connect the table of values to our words and descriptions. If we start calculating what we call the first differences, you learned about first differences last week, we would get 50 minus 40 equals 10. So this is going up by $10. Here, 60 minus 50 is also 10. If we carry on finishing up the first differences, 70 minus 60, we get 10, and 80 minus 70, we also get 10. Again, it's important to note that here, in this case here, we are going up by 1 each time. So for every 1 hour increase, we are increasing our cost by $10. Where did we see the $10 before? Well, it's in our rate of change. The rate of change is $10 per hour. And we see when we do first differences in our table of values, we're getting that rate of change right here. So one connection you can make is that the rate of change is the same as the first differences. And there's another name we use to represent first differences or rate of change. The other name we can describe these as is the slope. So the slope, first differences, rate of change, it's all the same thing. Okay, so now let's go and make our graph. Our independent variable goes on the horizontal axis, which commonly is referred to, another way of referring to it rather, is the x-axis. And the dependent variable goes on the vertical axis, or we call it in mathematics, the y-axis. So you have your x-axis for the independent variable, and the y-axis is your dependent variable. So make sure you're always labeling when you're doing your graph, so time and cost. When you make a graph, you want your scale to be even. So we are starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and spreading it out evenly. Same thing with our scale for our y-axis. Make sure you're going up by the same amount each time. So starting at 0, we're going up by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, etc. Okay, so now all we have to do is just plot these points. Okay, at 0 hours, our cost is $40. So put a point right here. At 1 hour, our cost is 50. So there's 50. At 2 hours, we're at 60. 3 hours, we're at 70. At 4 hours, we were at 80. Right? And once we have our dots, I mean, we could keep going. We know that 5 hours, well, if we follow the pattern, would go over here. And then we draw a nice straight line through it, and that's the line of best fit. Okay, now that we have our table values and our graph, we need to come up with an equation. This is the part that some students struggle with, but if you understand the concept, it's actually not too hard. So to figure out what the equation is, you really need to ask yourself, what am I doing to the x values or the time values to get the cost? So you're asking yourself, if I had to figure out what the rule is to go from 0 to 40, 1 to 50, 2 to 60, 3 to 70, 4 to 80, what is that rule? And it's got to be the same rule each time to go from these numbers to these values. So it's not just a random guessing game. There are some clues and some points that will help you to figure out, what am I doing to 0 to get to 40? What am I doing to 1 to get to 50? And some of the key ideas is you want to use the rate of change. What's the rate of change? Well, it was 10. We knew it was going up by $10 per hour. So that's an important part, that the rate of change, I'm just going to abbreviate it as ROC, is $10 per hour. Another important point that helps us to figure out the equation is, where did we start off with? Well, our initial value is 40. That's our starting point. We start at 40, and every time we kept adding another 10. So this value of 40 is important. It is called the initial value. So our initial value is 40. In a linear relation, your equation should have your rate of change and your initial value in the actual equation. So when we write our final equation, we should see the number of 10 in there, and we should see the number of 40. We have to figure out what the connection is here. So at 0, we know that 0 hours, we're starting at 40, and we have to add $10 for every hour. In this case here, we had no hours, so 10 times 0 means there's no hours money added, but we're starting at 40. So 40 actually equals 40 plus 10 times 0. Let's see what happens when you have 1 hour. Here we start at 40 plus $10 times 1 hour. So 10 times 1 is 10 plus the original 40 is how we get 50. What about for hour 2? Well, again, we're going to start at 40 and add $10 for every 2 hours. So 10 times 2. 40 plus 10 times 2. For the third hour, we'll have 40 plus 10 times 3, which will give us 70. And for the fourth hour, it's 40 plus 10 times 4, which gives us 80. So hopefully you start to see the pattern. Oh, right, each of these lines, we're doing 40 plus 10 times whatever the time is. So this is the part that's changing, the time, right? That's the variable. So instead of writing every single number, we can, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and keep on going, we can say, hey, let's represent this with H for time. So the expression we can say is, hey, anytime you want to figure out the cost to rent this canoe, start at $40 plus $10 times however many hours you use the canoe. And we're going to use the letter H to represent the hours. And right there, that's our expression. It's an expression for figuring out the cost. All you have to do to make it an equation is tell me, what does this equal? What does 40 plus 10H equal? Well, this expression always gives us the cost. So C. So C equals 40 plus 10H. And there you go. Here's our equation right here. C, as in cost, equals $40 plus 10, which is our rate of change, times H, which is the number of hours you're using the canoe. So now we have successfully taken our words, created a table of value, created a graph, and come up with an equation. Hopefully you can do this again in the next example.